Hello and welcome to this video on 10 presentation mistakes to avoid. In this session we will look at the 10 main business presentation mistakes presenters most often make and how to avoid them. Let's get started. Hello Jane. Are you ready for another quick session with Kim on the 10 most common business presentation mistakes to avoid?
Hello Brian. Absolutely.
Excellent. Let's go then.
Good morning, lady and gentleman.
Good morning, Kim.
Hello again, Kim.
I thought we'd take a look at the 10 most common presentation mistakes to avoid. The first being not knowing, and thereby boring your audience. What do you think I mean by that, Jane?
Well, for me, not knowing my audience could mean that I forget they are finance people who expect to see numbers. I would bore them to death if I gave them a presentation full of words and pretty pictures. They expect and need to see numbers, graphs and charts.
And for you, Brian?
I would show my presentation audience that I do not know them if I give a presentation that has little or nothing to do with the product they are interested in purchasing. I would bore them if I gave them unnecessary information and if I loaded them with lots of words and numbers. Sales and marketing is all about emotions, so after giving them a brief list of product specifications, I always focus on stunning images of the product being used in the perfect setting, so that they will want to buy it.
Excellent. Our second presentation mistake or thing to avoid doing is wasting your audience's time. Brian, could you name a few ways you could do that?
The first would be if I arrive late for a presentation, forcing everyone to wait for me. That is not only rude, but it also wastes their time, and everyone has too little of it already in business, so wasting it is inexcusable. That is why if I'm traveling to a client for a presentation, I make sure to arrive early, so that I can be set up and ready to greet them as they arrive on time. Another would be if I ramble on about nothing and don't get to the point. This is bad because it means that I could have made the meeting shorter, giving them back some time.
Good. And you, Jane? Do you have any?
A pet peeve of mine is when someone books a 1-hour meeting and goes over time to finish late. This drives me crazy, as I often have back-to-back meetings with barely a minute to get to my next meeting, and if someone goes over, then it makes me late and I seem to be disrespecting the next person's time, when it was not my fault.
I totally agree with you on that point. Our third thing is not informing your audience. What do you think, Jane?
Oh yes. This one is important too. If I get a presentation invitation and it does not include information on the topic or the agenda list of what will be discussed, I find it most frustrating because I then need to contact the sender to get the information I need.
And for you, Brian?
For me, it would be an issue when a new supplier does not share the new product's specifications before the session, and so I have to go into the presentation blind, without being able to think it over, do research on it, or be able to prepare questions ready to ask them during the session.
The fourth presentation mistake, or thing to avoid doing, is not engaging your audience.
This is one of the main reasons I so enjoy your presentations, Kim, because you keep Jane and I involved by asking our opinions, etc. There is nothing more boring than having to just sit and listen to someone drone on for an hour without being engaged or being brought into the conversation by the presenter.
I really appreciate that, Brian. Thank you. The fifth presentation mistake is not knowing your subject or not having expert knowledge of the topic you are presenting.
Oh. I attended one like that, just last week. I was invited to a presentation on internal audit procedures, by a supposed expert in the field. I remember being very excited to attend, as I hoped to learn the latest procedures. Instead, I found that the presenter was not even aware of the changes we have to comply with by the end of this year. So, it was a complete waste of my time.
That is terribly irritating.
I agree.
Number 6 is not over-preparing. What could I mean by this, do you think?
This takes a bit more time, but it is totally worth it in the end. I do extra research, read, reread and reread my presentation until I know it almost by heart and nearly don't need to look at the screen when I present it. That allows me to face my audience and to keep eye contact with them, establishing that human connection. Also, it allows me to start thinking of possible questions they may have as I go through the presentation. That way I can already think about my answers and have them ready to give on the day, so that it comes off seamlessly, professionally and confidently.
That is so true. It is absolutely terrible to have someone stumble around looking for answers if they were caught off guard or were surprised by a question they had not anticipated and prepared for. Of course, we cannot prepare for everything and we do still need to know how to roll with any surprises, but by being prepared these will be a lot less.
Exactly. The 7th presentation mistake to avoid doing is to not clutter your presentation slides. Here, I mean that you should not have more than 5 bullet points on a slide at a time. And you should use keywords and graphics wherever possible. And you should talk about only one subtopic per slide. The next item is related to not cluttering your slides, and it is to not use irrelevant or unnecessary or too many images, pictures or graphics on a slide. Any image you use on a slide must relate or tie into the content on that slide. Do not use pictures just because they are pretty or add color, they should only be used if they make the content easier to understand.
I once had a very arty client, who loved to put a picture of a flower on every slide. It was so funny because the presentations were about electronic products, so her floral pictures just looked out of place and confusing.
The 9th mistake presenters make is to not be concise and to the point.
I know all about the importance of this one. I once had to work with a sourcing manager who would take forever to say something simple. I could never get over how much he would ramble. I would get an essay every time I asked him for something simple, like the name of the folder under which a customer's contract was saved. It was incredibly frustrating.
Our 10th and final presentation mistake to avoid doing is not sticking to the topic and the allotted time.
My worst meeting is a recurring one every Friday. The presenter is supposed to be giving us a quick update on a project that I sponsor. And instead he insists on speaking about everything and he bounces around all over the place without speaking about the actual reason for the meeting. I think he is lonely and has no one else to talk to, so I don't complain, but it wastes my time.
You are such a softie sometimes.
And with that, we have come to the end of today's presentation. I hope you have found it helpful and I look forward to our next session. I will email you the presentation so that you can refer back to it later on, if you need to. Thank you for attending.
In this session I learnt some great tips on things to avoid or not do when giving a business English presentation. To start, I learnt to always consider who my audience is and what they will need to get out of my presentation. Then, I learnt to not waste their time. I learnt to keep my audience engaged and informed with everything they'd need. 5 is to thoroughly know your topic, including those things that most people would not need to know. I learnt to always be thoroughly prepared, to not clutter slides, and how to use graphics effectively. 9 is to be brief and to the point. Finally, I learnt to stay on topic and to start and end on time.
If you liked this video and are interested in more business English content, please do like and subscribe. And, do check out our website on optimumbusinessenglish.com. Thank you and see you again next time.